Hello, Real Talkers. I think it's really befitting right before Hanukkah to air this great interview with Rabbi Levi Shem Tov. He's the Executive Vice President of American Friends of Lubavitch. He serves the Jewish community of Washington, D.C., as well as the daily governmental and diplomatic needs of the international Chabad Lubavitch movement. Known for his high-level bipartisan connections and influence, he has been dubbed the Rabbi of Capitol Hill, a Washington institution, one of the most unlikely players in the nation's capital, a fixture on the diplomatic circuit, and one of the most savvy politicos in town. Thank you for being us, Rabbi Shem Tov.
All right.
I want to know from your perspective, doing a little recap of what has happened. Assad reign has fallen, Israel is strong, and Trump is coming back to the White House. How do you see it from a more Jewish point of view, a Chabad point of view?
Those sound like three different perspectives, but the truth is that they're all the same. Because what's good for the Jewish people and good for Israel is good for Chabad. And vice versa. What's good for Chabad is ultimately good for Israel and good for the Jewish people. I think it's too soon to make any judgments about how this will pan out, because the people who are now in control of Syria are not necessarily people who are the best of our friends, at least some of them. When it comes to the Druze or it comes to the Kurds, I think the disposition towards the Jewish people might be more positive. In terms of the ISIS-connected or other elements, we don't know. However, the United States and Israel have obviously taken advantage of the past 24, 48 hours to mitigate, if not minimize, the threat that a nasty new regime might pose. However, it's my hope, and I think the hope of many others, that those who will now be in control of Syria will see a new future, a new day, and will recognize that Israel wants to live in peace with everyone if they just want to live in peace with us. It's been proven.
The Rabbi had said, when Damascus will fall, redemption will start. What's your comment?
Look, the Rebbe has become synonymous with the yearning for redemption and with the proximity to redemption, and this was what the Rebbe wanted, right? I remember one time when I was receiving $1 from the Rebbe, and I asked the Rebbe for a bracha, which he gave me, Baruch Hashem, for my work, and then the Rebbe said clear, that my main objective is that Mashiach should come. Anything that gives the feeling to people that this is coming closer, obviously when it's things of when we're talking about things of great proportions, which the Rebbe himself pointed to, like the falling of the Iron Curtain, etc., we know we're definitely not further from Mashiach.
Trump is coming back for the second time. What are your fears and hopes?
My fears is that people that will expect too much too soon, and sometimes confuse themselves and forget that he has other concerns beside what we might want at a particular moment. However, I was very encouraged by what he said yesterday, which did not get as much notice as the hell to pay comment, where he said that if the hostages are not released by the time he's president, there will be hell to pay. But yesterday, if you noticed, he said that he would like for the whole Gaza crisis to wrap up, but there needs to be victory. And he said that people are denying what happened on October 7th, and it's almost like the Holocaust, where there's the October 7th denial now. And he obviously is not going to stand for that.
Did you ever think you would see again Trump and Bibi back in power at the same time?
Look, in the course of my work, I think a lot of things that other people don't think. But, and I'm not on one side or the other ever. I'm always in the middle. That's where my place of my shlichus is. And I do as much as I can not to deviate politically in that sense. But it's obviously the situation we have now. So we have to look and hope that this will be a combination that will work.
Rabbi Shem Tov, Chabad is known not to take political sides. How hard must it be for you, who are so inside the political arena, to keep neutral?
So I will tell you what I told some journalists in the past. When it comes to the political world and my work, it's almost as if I feel like I'm walking a tightrope over a cesspool, wearing a straitjacket with everybody demanding that I dance. It's not an easy situation, but Baruch Hashem, until now, things have worked. So I hope that they will work going forward. And obviously, we have friends that work on both sides of the aisle in all of the spheres of government. And our job is not to determine who sits where, it's to determine that whoever sits wherever they sit has the ability to hear us and work with us.
Okay, a little personal question. How hard is it then for a shaliach who is so close to power and big personalities all the time to stay focused and carry on the Rebbe's shlichut?
I'm not here on my own. I'm here because the Rebbe told me to come here. And therefore, I feel that as imperfect as I might be, I always strive to be someone who doesn't let the Rebbe down and who does what I am able to do, understanding full well that my efforts are turbocharged by the Rebbe's brachas. And that's why ever since the first bracha I requested from the Rebbe in my shlichus, which he, Baruch Hashem, granted me, I always feel like what I want to do is to make sure l'sakin ha'olam b'malchus shin daled yud, l'shakin shmo yishom, to make sure that more people than before will know about the Rebbe, will know about the Rebbe's mission, will know about the Rebbe's viewpoints, and will be able to be informed by them as they make their decisions, oftentimes decisions which impact many people.
Rabbi Shem-Tov, you took Trump to visit the Ohel of the Rebbe. I want to ask you, how real is he? Many people wonder, is it a show? Is it to gain sympathy? Or he really means it?
I want to say two things. First of all, both sides were able to come. The oil is a non-political place. And President Trump, President-elect Trump now, decidedly made that visit non-political. He didn't speak to the press. There was no political statement made. He came there on a personal basis. He said his prayers. He did what people do with the oil in terms of his reflection, and he left. And I think that just like anybody else in the world, he has to be accorded his personal space when he comes to a place of such sanctity. Now, obviously, the fact that he visited generated a lot of interest. I can't tell you how many people have called and asked me what did he write on his note. It's nobody's business but his. But I feel he was very reflective. He was very respectful, and he was in a zone which I personally have never seen him before, even though I've been in his presence many, many times. There was a certain aspect to his demeanor which was very inspiring, I must say. And people don't know him that much that way because they know him in the public persona, celebrity. But if you speak to people who do know him, he happens to be a very warm, engaging, friendly person who prizes loyalty and stands behind the people who stand behind him, from what I know. I mean, I'm not his intimate friend, but I do know people who are his intimate friends. And I'm not going to talk about his family members. That's a whole separate discussion. But I think what we saw there, particularly in the private parts of the visit that weren't broadcast, was somebody who was very reflective, very subdued, very focused, and I would say somewhat spiritual in that experience.
Your father, who is the first shaliach in Washington, and yourself are both very close to the President of the United States. How much influence do you really have?
Well, the one who's president now happens to be the one who knows me and my father the best, by name. He used to travel Amtrak with my father once a week, sometimes twice a week from Washington. He'd get off in Wilmington, my father a few minutes later in Delaware, in Philadelphia. And their supporters at that time were very much the same people because they were the Jewish community leaders in Philadelphia. They got to know each other well. And one moment that would express this is when he came to light the menorah. He, on his own, without any involvement from us, prepared his remarks and said words of the Rebbe. So all those many hours which my father spent with him over a number of years, decades, I would say, allowed him to learn a lot about Lubavitch, a lot about the Rebbe. You can imagine my shock when I once asked whether he'd come to an event where the Shluchim all came to Washington, and he said, "Oh, is this the event you always do for the Rebbe?" And this was like on the tip of his tongue. It wasn't like somebody had to inform him. He had an event at the White House. He was quoted the Rebbe left, right, and center, not off written remarks. So you can't really ask me to say what kind of influence we have. He and President Trump are two very different people. We were treated very well by the president and his staff and his administration the last time he was president. I assume it will be the same in the coming administration. Obviously, his daughter and son-in-law davened in our shul that time. I don't think they're moving back, so I don't think that will happen again. But we're talking about an incoming president that has a relationship with the Jewish community. It goes back way beyond his presidential term. People don't know this, and I had it researched, and somebody sent me all the papers. But the president's father, Fred Trump, many years ago in the 70s, people are unaware, but he used to give his apartments rent-free to Russian immigrants who just came off the plane to a brand new world, who didn't yet have a job, and they'd pay him once they were employed. There were so many of them that they asked him to give them a room for Yom Kippur. They wanted to do services for Yom Kippur. So he did it 1 year, then he did it another year. Then the third year, he says, I'm not going to do it. Go build a synagogue. I'll help you build a synagogue. And I heard this and I thought, oh, it's a nice little folk tale. But the rabbi went and researched the Avenue Z Jewish Center and realized that Fred Trump was once the guest of honor at their dinner and used to give them a check every year. And the person sent me copies of those checks. So we're talking about someone who's supportive of Israel and the Jewish community many years ago. President Trump, obviously everyone knows the plaques on his wall in his office were all from Jewish organizations. And I'm not going to get political about this viewpoint, but it's important to recognize that he has had positive dealings and interactions with the Jewish community all of his career. I mean, I don't know how many of his deals were made with Jewish people, with Hasidic Jews. In particular, people told me stories of what they did with him. So this is not coming from his PR department, but we have to understand a man who's not Jewish, a man who, by definition, leads a life that's not a Jewish life, but has a great respect for Jewish people and for Jewish things. And this precedes the introduction of Jews into his very own family. So I think we have to look at the history before he ever thought of being president, at a time when he was still saying he never wants to go into politics. This was many years ago. But he said if there was something compelling, he would do it, but it wasn't his preference. And for many years, he actually did not do so. So I don't know. I think that he's very business-minded and deal-oriented. And just like he, through his son-in-law and Avi Berkowitz and others, they made the deal of the century with the Abraham Accords, I think we're going to see more things in that direction.
There's a video going around where you were approached pretty violently by a Free Palestine dude, and you give a very calm and valid answers to someone who didn't even want to hear your answers. Yet you stayed calm and patient. Are you always so patient? Is this the right approach?
My approach is very simple. Please understand that I look very different from most of the people who operate in the Washington arena. I'll recall for you a conversation I had with Ajay Banga, who's the president of the World Bank. He's a Sikh. He wears a turban. He has a beard like I do. And was telling me how sometimes he encountered difficulties in his career because people judged him by his appearance, which has happened to me many times. But I've always believed, and I have then seen, that when you approach people with sensitivity and with conviction, enough times they will listen to you, even if they don't want to initially have anything to do with you. So this Palestinian irritant who bothered me while I was just walking to my Uber, I told him what I thought, I told him what's part of my heritage and what's the history of the Jewish people, and what Rashi told us 1,000 years ago is what we should say, and what the Rebbe in more recent times reiterated that we should say with pride. The land of Israel is the land of the Jewish people. That doesn't mean other people can't live there in peace with us. And indeed, ask all the Arab citizens of Israel whether they would rather live under Israeli authority or under Palestinian authority. 77% told the Palestinian pollster they'd rather live under Israeli authority. Why? Because we, the Jewish people, don't mean anyone any harm or any ill. We are very robust in military activity to protect ourselves. And we will always do so, because that's what the Torah tells us to do. Halacha tells us very clearly that if someone wants to wage war on us, we have to wage war, even in a preemptive measure, and even on Shabbos, when that's necessary, in order not to put ourselves and our lives and our families at risk. However, when we can avoid war, we can avoid conflict, we have to try and do so. So this gentleman who approached me was raised in a different perspective, finds his way of life to be effective when he's annoying, which I disagree with. And that's why I told him things like, he once saw me like a year ago and he said, nobody loves you, everybody hates you. So I wanted to remind him that after that time, I checked with my mother and my family, and they still love me. There was no reason to engage him violently as other people have done. Even verbally violent is not a very good and effective measure. But millions of people have seen this clips in the various places it was posted. And I think my idea got through, even though he didn't want it to, and he kept interrupting me and being rude. I think that the fact that we have a historic connection to the land of Israel, which precedes that of the other two monotheistic faiths, is something which is lost upon people. Yes, it's true. The modern state of Israel was created with less than 100 years ago. But that's not the foundation of our valid claim to the land. It's not democracy, it's not technology, although those things are beautiful. The reason we have a claim to the land is because it's ours, because it belongs ultimately to God who gave it to us. And we don't have to be ashamed of that. We have to just be wise about how we impart this wisdom. But as long as other nations of the world understand this not as harsh, but as accommodating to all people who seek peace, then I think we'll have a better future. I've had this discussion with probably more Arab and Muslim personalities than any other people you've interviewed. And I tell them very clearly, if Israel's a 76-year-old democracy, it's going to be a bone in the Middle Eastern throat that's not going to easily be absorbed. But if you will see Israel as the multi-millennial enterprise of the Jewish people, then there's a greater hope for peace, because then you see our connection to that region as being as old as anybody else's connection to that region. And therefore, when people look at me or you or other people that have a European appearance, we're not foreigners. We were always there. We got ejected from the region by force, and now we came back to the region. That's a very, very different point of view than someone who feels like some Western democracy has come and imposed itself upon the Middle East. And I think that as long as these discussions are had with respect, because in the Arab world, respect is very, very big. It's paramount. But I've not found myself falling on deaf ears when I have this discussion, because then once it's an Abrahamic discussion, it becomes a discussion among cousins. I will tell you something interesting from my experiences, which predates the Abraham Accords by well over a decade. It was Rosh Hashanah. And I was asking in my speech before Tkiyas Shofar, why of all the things in the world and things in the Torah we can read. We don't read about Aseret HaDibros, Ten Commandments. We don't read about Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus. We don't even read about Brias Ha'olam, the creation of the world. When we're about to sound the shofar, which is Mamlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, where we express our the sovereignty of God, what do we read about? A domestic dispute between two wives of Avram Avinu. Why is that what's so important to read about? And I said, perhaps God wants us to recognize that the greatness of the Arab world is not just a fluke. It's something that God has destined in a promise to Hagar and to Avraham Avinu, because he was conflicted. But God also told him, Ki bi Yitzchak yikorei lecho zora, v'gam es ben ha'oma l'goy asimenu. We have to recognize our space, but we also have to recognize their space without losing pride in our chosenness. The result of that speech was that somebody went to one of the Gulf foreign ministers, told them about it, and he reached out to me, and we started a whole relationship, which was first not as apparent, but then developed into a relationship with their monarch and with other officials of the region, and it was all built on mutual respect, not on demands. And I think that that is the way forward for all of us, for Klal Yisrael and for the region. We now have a blessed time where from turmoil comes amazing things. Just before a child is born, there's all types of anxiety and turmoil, but then a new life is brought into the world. And I think that even with the distractions, and I call them distractions, not to minimize, God forbid, the horrific impact it has had on the Jewish people. But when we have things that are distractions, I should say intended distractions, by people who cannot stand to see the new peace, and they do things so horrific, like October 7th, and even the more recent killing of my colleague, of Tzvi Kogan HaKoyen, Hashem Yinkem Damai. And we see that people do all these dastardly things to rip us away from a good path forward. We must know light will always triumph over darkness. I believe that the Muslim world is committed to a more peaceful future. There have been those that have successfully distracted large segments of it through violence. But more and more prominent Muslim figures are telling me, first privately, many of them have started to go public with this viewpoint, that the way forward is one of salam, one of peace, one where we can recognize each other's virtues and go forward properly. And this is something which another time we can discuss, things that I've learned that the Rebbe told Shluchim privately in this regard. The way forward is not territorial concession. That has not brought peace, and we've seen that that is not the way to silence the people who want to eradicate us. It only gives them false appetites. The way is to show a mutual respect and a mutual way forward in peace, which is good for both sides. This is what the Rebbe said. We're ultimately on the same side in one world that we have to live in together. We will not give away. I don't want to say give back, because there's nothing to give back. It's ours. But we will not give away what's precious to us. But we will give space in conversation so that we can use that which we have been blessed with and share that blessing with the rest of the region and the rest of the world, whether it be economic development, medical development, irrigation and agriculture, all of the things that we can bring to the world. We're willing to share it all, aren't we? But we want to live in peace. Every mother in the world wants to tuck her kids into bed at night knowing that they won't have to wake up to a siren, but to an alarm clock to go to a beautiful day the next day. And when we can achieve that, we will ultimately be victorious. And those in the region that have tried that have found us to be a wonderful solution. And I think that those forces will prevail. The minister who's of state in the United Arab Emirates, who's the ambassador to the United States for the UAE, His Excellency, Mr. Youssef Al-Otaiba, said at the National Day that the killing of Rav Kogan was not a crime in the UAE. It was a crime against the UAE. People are yearning for a better way forward. They've seen enough killing. They don't want that anymore. And I think that now is an opportune time for us to seize that, and yes, bring the world to a better place, to a better recognition of what the real values of human life are, which will obviously usher in a time of ultimate redemption, when Mashiach will show the world what we've all been waiting for.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure speaking to you. Hope to host you here when you come next time to visit Israel.
I hope we'll come to Israel. Look, all I need is an excuse and a ticket, and I'm on my way. That's what I always tell people. But I hope that that all your listeners or all your viewers will be emboldened that we have been through one of the darkest periods we have ever endured, not just recently, but in our history, when our dignity was questioned, when our validity was questioned. But I also see great hope. When I was in Israel recently, I visited Kibbutz Be'eri, and I spent time with the son of a woman who was a hostage who was released. I don't know if I'm supposed to say names. And there, at the same place where his father was shot dead by the terrorists, he put on tefillin and said Shema, and told me, I don't want revenge. I don't want war. I just want peace. And as I've told so many in the Arab world, that the people that they killed on Simchas Torah, October 7th is what the world calls it, those were the people most inclined to make the concessions that our enemies were looking for. Now we have to move forward only with positivity. So, as we see Hanukkah coming, when the Jewish people looked very despondent, but we prevailed, so too will the spirit of light prevail, hopefully over darkness once again. And as I said before, herald a time when there will be no more darkness.
Beautiful. Thank you again. Very inspiring. Well, Real Talkers, I hope you were inspired because I was. So see you soon and have a great Hanukkah.